Hi, everybody. Welcome to Radical Civility. My name is Benjamin Piccini, and I want to start with a big thank you to a number of people who have reached out to me and cheered me on or said thank you. One of my favorite things to do is to read my friends' writing or watch a video of them, playing music on YouTube, and it's actually incredibly gratifying to hear that other people are willing to do something similar for me. And the compliments and the cheering on, I appreciate it more than you know. This has actually ended up being way more rewarding than I thought. I thought it would be a little weird to sit in my basement at 4 o'clock in the morning and record myself talking. And it seems to actually be working really great for me. So thank you for joining me on this journey. I'm really enjoying myself. On that topic, a couple of things. A couple of people have asked how they can support the podcast. So obviously you're welcome to share and like and share clips of things that you found really good. But probably the most important thing you can do is two things. The first one is, I've heard this said 1,000 times, but it finally clicked when I became a podcaster. If you write a review for the podcast, then it becomes more easily searchable. It comes up more often, and it's free, and it only takes a couple of minutes. So if you have found something meaningful and you want to review it, I would certainly appreciate that. That's a very simple, quick, easy thing you can do. If you could take 2 or 3 minutes, I would owe you one. The second thing you can do is, right now, like I said, I'm really enjoying this, but there is one problem, and that is that I want to hear from you too. I like engaging and not just me talking at you. It feels very weird to have my thoughts go out into the ether. And then people will just kind of mention in passing, oh yeah, the other day you talked about this. I was like, no, I didn't. I said that in my basement by myself. How did you? Oh, right, because I podcast now. I want to hear back from you. I like having the conversation. So I've started a Facebook page where you can come. It's called Radical Civility. And with each episode, I'm going to create a post for that episode. And that's where you can discuss what you liked, what you didn't like, your feedback, what you think I got wrong, what you think I got right. And engaging in that conversation is something that I'm really looking forward to. It should go without saying that you should be civil there. But other than that, there aren't very many rules. So to introduce today's podcast, I've been thinking a lot about commandments. And I think what I've decided is that I want to try, and it's probably going to be a disaster, but I want to try and come up with a list of 10 civility commandments for the age of online media, social media, and Donald Trump. We'll see how it goes. These are iterations, so I feel very comfortable saying they are rough drafts, and they'll probably need a lot of polishing. So I mean it when I say I want feedback on these, but these are kind of my attempt to tell you what I am thinking and what I'm feeling about a given topic at any given time. So with that, today's topic is Commandment 1, Radical Civility. That is the name of the podcast. It's also the name of the first commandment, and I'll explain why in just a minute. So with that, let's kick it off. Let's get something out of the way right off the bat. This podcast isn't called Remedial Civility. There was a Twitter handle for Radical Civility for a time, not owned by me nor associated with the podcast, that sputtered just after it began. The one tweet was about a stabbing in a movie theater, which apparently happened because a man was angry that someone was chewing too loudly and lashed out with a movie theater fork. Although now come to think of it, I can't remember if they were chewing too loudly or they were using their phone in the movie theater. Well, the owner of the Twitter handle dryly pointed out that it might be time for a dose of radical civility. Like, yeah, but that's not radical civility. That's remedial civility. And to be clear, I think there's evidence that a course in remedial civility is probably a good idea, right? We could use one of those right now, but I don't want this to become that. Radical civility to me, what does radical mean? It comes from the Latin for root, or meaning like fundamental. What's the core of an idea? And we now think of it as extreme, and I don't mind that, because as I was thinking about extreme civility, that's not a bad definition either. But what I mean by it is going back to the core of civility. Let me try and put it in a different way. In math, you can take calculus, where you learn how to do derivatives and integrals and lots of other cool things. And then you can take an analysis course. And the analysis course, real analysis or theory of analysis or something like that, you take that class, and that class will teach you how to derive all of calculus. You prove it, you go through the fundamentals, you understand where it's coming from, so that then you understand what the building blocks built. Okay? This podcast is meant to be more about the analysis than about the calculus. This is meant to show you my thinking on where civility comes from, so that if I end up getting the rules wrong, you can still see where my reasoning came from and what is implied by what I might have gotten wrong. Another illustration. A number of years ago, I was perusing. I'm really bad at this. When I go to people's homes, I judge them based on their bookshelf. Always positively, by the way. I've never seen a bookshelf and gone, ugh. But I am just transfixed by seeing what's on somebody's bookshelf and what that tells me about them. And so I was looking at somebody's bookshelf and I saw a book on etiquette. I thought, well, that's interesting. So I picked up the book and I thought, it was a very, very thick book too. It was a big book. And I saw rules about which fork to use at which point in the meal. And I kind of chuckled to myself and thought how silly it was to have such a big book on such a silly topic. And then I read something in the introduction that caught me off guard. It said, the meaning of etiquette is finding a way to make everyone else at your table feel welcome and feel like they belong. And I was blown away by that. And the whole point of all of the rules, it said, was to find ways to help them feel welcome. So yes, we say please and thank you, but the reason why we say please and thank you is to remind us that there is somebody else there at the table who deserves respect, who should be made to feel welcome. Perhaps not parenthetically, that friend and I hit it off. We've now been married a decade, and she's taught me a thing or two about social graces. As I like to say, she's mostly domesticated me. But I say it unironically and with a fair amount of gratitude. So etiquette, I think, is a good analog to civility. The root of etiquette is helping other people feel welcome. And then the rules stem from that, or at least they should. Okay. So what is civility's root? What is radical civility? Civility comes from the Latin civilis, meaning that which relates to citizens. Now you have to understand that a citizen in the Roman Republic was not anyone living within the boundaries. That's kind of how we think of it today. If you live within the United States, you're a United States citizen. A citizen in the Roman Republic was actually a fairly elite group. You had a vote, you had a voice, you owned some land, but only some people, in fact, a fairly small proportion, if I recall correctly, got to be citizens. Citizens had the duty to engage in politics, government, and the forging of a better world. So what is the root of civility then? There was an essay a number of years ago that made me think of it this way, and I love it. Civility is a mode of engagement. Civility is how we talk about hard things. At least it's how we talk about them without resorting to hitting each other with sticks afterwards. People say that we need to dispense with civility so that we can talk about hard conversations like politics or race or religion or the controversy of the day. But that's a misunderstanding of civility. Civility is how we talk about topics like politics, race, religion, or the controversy of the day. Civility is a mode of engagement. It's how we engage. And a good measure of how civil you are is how able you are to have productive, meaningful, connective, hard conversations. What this means is that you and I can never use civility as a good reason to run from the argument. Never again. Because civility is a mode of engagement. A ship in port is safe, but that's not what she was built for. And civility was built for engaging. One last example. I'm an occasional listener to the Federalist podcast, and I love Ben Dominich's sign-off line. He always says, "Until next time, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray." It's a pretty cool line. Well, I looked it up because I found it interesting, and it's a quote from Calvin Coolidge. I won't steal his line, but I may go through Coolidge talks and see if I can find a really good sign-off line for myself here. It's a quote from a speech of his where he's talking about some pre-revolution men who didn't know what was coming, but were still ready to fight. He says that they didn't know that there was a constitution and that there were going to be a revolution against the monarch and throwing off the chains of tyranny. None of that was in their heads yet. These young men were simply, quote, lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray, close quote. Well, civility is treating the other person with human dignity, fundamental human dignity. And radical civility means being anxious for the fray. Thanks for listening. I hope you find it helpful. Radical Civility is written, produced, and edited by Benjamin Piccini. The views in Radical Civility are not necessarily the views of my employer, my religion, my family, or myself in the future when I am smarter and wiser. Bye, everybody.